Continuity and survival of Harappan civilization to Vedic civilization. Decline had set at Mohenjo-daro by 2200 BC and the settlement had come to an end by 2000 BC. In some places, the civilization continued till 1800 BC. Apart from the dates, the pace of decline also varied. Mohenjo-daro and Dholavira gave a picture of gradual decline, while at Kalibangan and Banavali, city life ended suddenly. Archaeological evidence does not give direct access to the possible social and political dimensions of the decline of the Harappan civilization. What it does indicate very clearly is that the Harappan phase was followed by a post-urban phase known as the late Harappan phase. Scholars working on the Harappan civilization no longer look for the causes of its decline because the scholars who studied the Harappan civilization right up to the 1960s believed that the collapse of the civilization was sudden. These scholars concentrated their work on the studies of cities, town planning, and large structures. Problems such as relationship of the Harappan sites with the contemporary villages and the continuity of various elements of the Harappan civilization were ignored. Thus, the debate about the causes of the decline of the civilization became more and more abstract. Towards the end of the 60s, scholars like Malik and Fossil focused their attention on various aspects of the continuity of the Harappan tradition. It is true that Harappa and Mohenjo-daro were abandoned and the urban phase came to an end. However, if we take a perspective covering the entire geographical spread of the Harappan civilization, a few things seem to continue in the old style. Some settlements were abandoned, but most other settlements remained in occupation. However, the tradition of uniform writing, seals, and weights and pottery were lost. In other words, the activities associated with city centered economies were given up. Thus, the change that came about simply indicated the end of the urban phase. Small villages and towns continued to exist, and the archaeological finds from these sites show many elements of the Harappan tradition. In most of the sites of Sindh, it is difficult to observe any change in the pottery tradition. In the areas of Gujarat, Rajasthan, and Haryana, vibrant agricultural communities emerged in large numbers in the succeeding period. Thus, from a regional perspective, the period succeeding the urban phase can be treated as one of flourishing agricultural villages which outnumbered those of the urban phase. That is why scholars now discuss issues like cultural change, regional migrations, and modifications in the system of settlement and subsistence. Moreover, there are five geographical zones of the late Harappan phase: Sindh, West Punjab and the Ghaggar Hakra Valley, Eastern Punjab and Haryana, the Ganga Yamuna Doab, Kutch and Saurashtra. The end of cities did not mean the end of the Harappan tradition. The Harappan communities merged into the surrounding agricultural groups. However, the centralized decision making in the polity and economy had ended. The Harappan communities, which continued after the urban phase, would have retained their older traditions. It is likely that the Harappan peasants would retain their forms of worship. The priests of the Harappan urban centers were part of a highly organized literate tradition. Even if literacy ended, they are likely to have preserved their religious practices. The dominant community of the subsequent early historic period called itself the Aryans. These people do not seem to have possessed a literary tradition. Possibly, the priestly groups of the Harappan merged into the ruling groups of the Aryans. As such, the Harappan religious tradition transmitted to the historical India. The folk communities also retained the traditions of craftsmanship, as is evident from the pottery and tool making traditions. Once again, when literate urban culture emerged in the early India, it absorbed elements of the folk cultures. This would provide more effective channel of transmission of the Harappan tradition. Many elements of the Harappan civilization survived in the subsequent historical tradition, as the culture of Indus Valley civilization has been preserved without a breakdown to the present day, and it includes all walks of life, not just the religious and spiritual fields. For example, in religious and spiritual fields, we can see that the Pashupati of the Harappans shows a remarkable resemblance of the Shiva of the later Hinduism traditions. Worship of the people tree and humped bull are still prevalent in the Indian society. Worship of Shakambri, the Mother Earth, continues in the countryside. Worship of male and female creative energy in the form of stone icons of lingas and yonis continue to the present day. Discovery of fire altars in Lothal and Kalibangan gives indication towards fire cult. Later, fire came to occupy a very important position in Hindu way of worship. And if we see continuity in other fields, it is like in pottery, some of the forms and features of the pots used by Harappans can be seen in traditional kitchens even today. People lived in houses of different sizes, mostly consisting of rooms arranged around a central courtyard, which can be seen in Indian villages even today. Lost wax method was used in the making of famous dancing girl of Mohenjo-daro. This technique is still used in certain parts of India. Mesopotamian texts mention cotton as one of the imports from Maluha, and traces of cotton cloth were also found at Mohenjo-daro. India continues to produce and export cotton. The beginning of the system of binary, decimal, and other measurements and weights which were used by the Harappans have continued into later India. For example, 1 rupee equals 16 annas. Use of dhoti like lower garment which continues in the countryside, and an upper garment consisting of a shawl or cloak worn over one shoulder and under the other was in vogue during the historical periods. For example, this style is visible in the images of Buddha also. Use of talisman and amulets still continues in the Indian society. Some of the symbols like swastik, circle, etc., found on the Harappan seals remain important till this day. Continuity of dice games, kajal for eyes kept in jars with sticks, ivory combs, nose rings, bangles, rosary, etc., continues. Cultivation of crops like wheat, barley, rice, etc., continues even today. Separate bathing areas and toilets have been found in many houses of the Harappan civilization. This can be seen in the countryside till now. The Harappans make elaborate arrangements for water, for drinking, and bathing. The emphasis on providing water for bathing suggests that they were very particular about personal hygiene. This consciousness for personal hygiene can still be witnessed in the Indian society. The practice of building ritual bathing tanks and taking holy dip and ablution can be traced back directly to the Harappan period. Thus, it would be appropriate to say that the continuity of Harappan civilization into later ages covers all walks of life, not just the religious and spiritual fields. If you want to know anything about Indian history, please leave it in the comment box so that I can come back with it. If you have liked the video, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.